Badenoch went in entirely on the grooming gang inquiry, and I guess, depending on your perspective, either managed or failed to walk the tightrope between sounding like you care about the victims more than anything else and sounding like you were using it to score political points. And Ed Davey went in on Brexit.
Yeah, definitely. Her tone wasn't right, I don't think, but I thought her questioning was quite good on the grooming gangs and questions to answer, putting those accusations from the victims who have quit the inquiry to the Prime Minister. It's fair to say that it has taken some time for the government to get this inquiry set up. It's fair to say that some of the victims are losing confidence in what the government is doing and the exact scope of the inquiry. That's fair. And I think she held his feet to the fire on that one. It's also fair to say that there are people in government who are concerned about Jess Phillips. And I think, actually, if we're talking about tone, her tone in the House of Commons yesterday, where she was very angry, I don't think helped diffuse the situation at all. The victims are clearly upset at the way things have unfolded. And actually, when someone's back is up against the wall, fighting out and lashing out in the way that Jess Phillips did, I didn't feel was a very helpful way to resolve that situation. Equally, I don't feel like Kemi Badenoch's way of
strengths and weaknesses can be the same characteristic, can't it? Depending on context. I'll tell you what I found fascinating was the explanation of why they didn't appoint a judge. And I'm afraid I owe an apology to my listeners because I was banging that particular drum earlier. I didn't realise that Louise Casey had advised not to appoint a judge.
I didn't know that either.
Herself, and that it would have an impact upon ongoing criminal cases. Potentially, I don't know that that's cast in stone, but as a former head of the DPP, I'll listen to Keir Starmer when he says if we had a judge in charge, then we'd have to wait for the criminal cases, for the inquiry to end before the criminal cases can continue. That's a pretty compelling response.
It is a pretty compelling reason, and also the speed as well, because victims have been saying that this is taking too long to do, and if Louise Casey is saying actually finding a judge is going to be even harder to make this happen and to make justice happen quickly, that seems to me like a very legitimate reason to not look ahead. But it does depend on what these victims want, and obviously we can't really describe them as one homogenous group. I think it's fair to say the last week has shown that there are different people in these victims groups in this inquiry that think very different things about what should happen, and it's obviously a very difficult issue for all political parties, as you just heard there from Kemi Badenoch, from Keir Starmer, rightly pointing out, well, this isn't something that you really did a lot in 14 years on.
She was women's minister, wasn't she? Women and Equality
minister.
Yeah,
she was. And it wasn't something that was, I don't believe, ever really brought up by her and during her term of government. But equally, there are reasons why the Labour Party will naturally be very cautious and very apprehensive about what could come out in terms of the local government, in terms of the councils that Kemi Badenoch mentioned, Trafford, Bradford, Blackpool, other councils, in terms of what might come out about whether that's police, whether that's social workers, whether that's councillors, and who covered up what, when. Those are all very legitimate questions that I think the Labour Party also will be very, very apprehensive to uncover. So,
do you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Well, if you're leading a council and
they may be apprehensive, but Keir Starmer won't be.
Well, no,
former head of the DPP has dedicated his entire life to pursuing these kind of criminals.
Yeah, and for the potential embarrassment that it might cause his party.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
not saying it's obviously his fault, and of course it's not.
Prioritise the people over the potential embarrassment, and you can't argue with the counting, can you? 14 years. Barely mentioned it. Inquiries that were conducted that weren't acted upon, and hopefully, it's the only thing that everyone can agree on. Hopefully, this is a bump in the road. Who's left then, apart from Jim Gamble? And now we understand why it probably shouldn't be a judge. Good piece in The Spectator, which is not something I often say. Two good pieces in The Spectator this week. Sam Leith writing a superb piece about Katie Lamb's hideous comments, and which didn't come up in the House of Commons today. And a piece about why Jim Gamble should, in fact, be the person that... What are his links with Labour? I wasn't aware of that.
So he joined the Labour Party, I think, before 2015 and then resigned it again under Corbyn, according to that Spectator article. And I don't think he has been involved in the Labour Party since. But yeah, understandably so, that people feel that this should be an apolitical figure with no links to any political parties. Again, that does make it even harder to find the right candidate. And while we're talking about judges, I was reading this morning, I think it was in the Times, when Theresa May was trying to look for a judge for the inquiry. I think she hired one from New Zealand, cost about £500,000, and didn't last very long either.
And went straight back home again.
Yeah,
you know, I
difficult.
Remember that. It's like a fever dream, those periods post-Brexit.
It's not easy. It's not easy to get this right. And understandably, the government are trying to keep these victims on side. But, if there's 30 on this inquiry panel and we've already lost 4, it's not a good look, is it?
No, it definitely isn't. And I think Jess Phillips, I didn't hear yesterday's exchange, but the thing that isn't properly reported is the fact that if you ask somebody whether they want something, in this case to broaden out the remit of the investigation, and you reply, no, I don't want that, and it doesn't happen, then there's no evidence that people have been trying to change the they've just asked you whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
If someone's whispering in your ear, they're trying to change it, then you will be entirely forgivable if you end up believing that that's true. So I presume that's where Phillips's frustration came from, is that nobody has tried to change the remit of the inquiry. They've simply asked the victims whether they would like the remit to be extended and expanded. Everyone says no, and it isn't. End of story in a normal universe.
Well, I think the suspicion came from the fact that it was the charity which the Home Office had been working with that had suggested this. But I can understand why you'd be suspicious of the government, why you'd be suspicious of the charity.
Suspicious of everything. Yeah. And that is the problem, and probably why things are going to take even longer than everybody would like them to take.
Yeah.
But there was one particularly unpleasant bit, wasn't there, where she accused the government of treating a victim's comments, I forget the point, when they did actually shout shame. She kind of tonally got that completely wrong, because it sounded as if she was trying to score political points and not necessarily being entirely accurate. But
I think maybe taking the tone down slightly would have worked better in what is obviously a very, very serious case, and I didn't think that quite worked for her.
Well, I'm sure it will be back, but hopefully not in quite such febrile circumstances. Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, many thanks indeed.